Bud's back again. Last week he dropped his version 2 of his 64 gigabyte image, and it was looking really good. All killer, no filler, and basically it's just not a ROM dump. It's what he finds are some really great games, went through a lot of these collections and really slimmed it down. And on the 64 gigabyte version, that's definitely something to do. But here we now have the 128 gigabyte version, and you're going to notice there's actually not a lot of differences. I would say the main difference being that it has a lot more PlayStation games. So instead of 110 PlayStation games, you're going to or instead of 20, you now have 110. You're going to find a couple other differences as well. So let's go ahead and check this one out. On first boot, it will prompt you to add your controller, so it's totally set up out of the box. The file size itself is 119 gigabytes. It's 127,865,455,000 bytes. That's a little on the cuff, but if you get a SanDisk or a Samsung, you should be totally fine on the micro SD front. It worked totally fine. I'm running the SanDisk Ultra, the one that was on sale not too long ago on Amazon Prime that I got. I think I paid like $23 for it. It was amazing back on Prime Day. And as far as space remaining, if you're wondering, okay, well, he had a 64, and if you're not throwing on all these ROMs, shouldn't he have a ton of extra space available? Well, not necessarily, because he went a little ham on the PlayStation and the PSP and the PSP Mini and the CD-based games that are going to take up a lot more space. So that's why this image is running the full 128 gigabytes. Now, as far as remaining space, out of those 128, which really, by the time you add the operating system and everything else, it's about 117. Out of that 117, there is about 4.5 gigabytes remaining. So that is another, 4 Dreamcast games, another system, a lot of potential there. So let's just have a quick look around. You have the collections here, which have your arcade old school, which is like your Galaga, really your really old school games. Then you have your Genesis hacks, NES hacks, and SNES hacks. And then you're going to have complete collection, which is, I believe, just all of them. Just all games, yeah. So 3600, and that complete collection is another word for all games. He has his favorites. His favorites are the same on both images. 321 Super Crash is a great game if you haven't heard it from me before. So he has his little favorites here, and you can add and remove your own. And he's actually put that in his, there's a little README file when you get this image, and it has some tips and tricks and instructions for you, and that's one of them. So we'll go through the systems and how many games are on here really quick. Something to note is Nintendo DS is on here. Some people don't like the way Drastic runs on the Raspberry Pi. I saw also a couple comments on a few of the last videos I've done, and I mean, you kind of, yeah, I would say it's not as good, but is it unplayable? No, I think, if you really want to play those games, they're there, they run, I would give it like a B plus, which is still decent. Okay, so let's get started here. Arcade, you got 1050, and this is a really nice arcade set. It's going to have everything for you, and if I remember right, when you go into one of these, you're going to have, first you have the Virtual Man loading screen. So tokens are going to be your special button, which for me is select, and then start gets you started in this game. But as you'll notice, the bezel here, it's a vertical game, therefore the bezel's a little larger. So this is all set up for you bezel-wise with those bezels installed. Okay, so that's running good. Start select out. So arcade 1050. Back again. But as far as themes go, this is the Back to Basics theme. He has a couple of Hirsty's really great themes on here. We're just going to run with Back to Basics for this particular video. It is not overclocked. It does come with background music quite a bit. I'm going to go ahead and show you what those MP3 files are if you are interested in that as well. Neo Geo 120. The Neo Geo Mini just came out, and a lot of people some people are excited about it. Some people are not. it is a mini HDMI, so you have to buy an adapter. I've heard screen tearing. The performance, the chip that's in there, the Raspberry Pi 3 is way more powerful than it is. So a lot of people, some people love it. I think to me, it's a really cool collector's item, something to look at. But as far as in all practicality, if I was to want to play Metal Slug or King of Fighters, I would pick a Raspberry Pi 3 over that any day of the week. A Raspberry Pi with like an arcade stick, something like that. And you can turn on and off shaders. And here you go. So this bezel is the, let's do a lot of, ooh. No! Okay. All right. Ooh, there we go. Boom. Almost a spare. Okay. I'll bowl my perfect 300 game on another video. So, all your Neo Geo's working, but back on the bezels, it's only going to be on the arcade system where you're going to have specific bezels per game. Atari 2600, 300, 7850, Atari Lynx Portable 40, NES 375, and then you got some hacks as well. Super Nintendo 470, Nintendo 64 175. That's still quite a bit, but this is running on the Raspberry Pi 3B+. This is the Retropie 4.4, so you can run this on a Raspberry Pi 3B, 1.2 gigahertz, or 1.4 gigahertz Raspberry Pi 3B+. And with the B+, a lot of these games are going to run pretty good. And of course, you can overclock for even better performance. So in case you guys are wondering what Nintendo 64 games are, there you go. Game Boy Advance 150, just wanted to show you really quick that these are running bezels and the screen is not stretched either. This is one of my favorite ways of playing these games. To me, it's the crisper image. Whether you're on a monitor or a big screen TV, it's still plenty big. The only time it might not be very big is if you're on like a portable screen, at which point you can turn off the bezels, change the resolution. Okay, so you guys see that. And that's going to be the same for like Game Boy, Game Gear. They have those little bezels. Nintendo DS does not have bezels. 70 games here, in case you're wondering on these 70. Again, all killer, no filler. So hopefully a lot of these games are some of the best sellers, some of the games that he feels should be on here. You might feel that one game was missing on it, and you could totally add that. SEGA Master System, 100 games. Sega Genesis, 320. And it does say Genesis, but if you want to change it to Mega Drive, there's a script in Retropie to do that for you. Just click a button, and you're there. Restart, and then it'll say Mega Drive. 32X, 20. Sega CD, 50. So, in case you're wondering on the 50 here, because this is not the whole collection. Do you have the Terminator? Dreamcast 30. So here's really where one of the biggest differences you're going to see in the 64 gigabyte versus the 128 is you're going to have a lot more room for Dreamcast and PlayStation. Rippin' Riders, Shenmue's on here. I know a lot of you guys like that. Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2, great game. Virtual Fighter, Zombie Revenge. Game Gear 60, PlayStation 110. In case you guys want to see what's on here on the PlayStation. It's quite a bit of PlayStation. And then you can always just network into your Raspberry Pi and drag and drop games with the hopefully if you have the artwork as well, and switch a lot of these out. They're quite large files, so if you get rid of 5, you can add 5. PSP, you got 10. This is another big difference. I think the other one only had like 2 or 3 PSP games. So a few more titles there. PSP Minis, 50 games. And I mean, PSP Minis, there's like over close to 300 plus titles. So 50 is just his best 50. TurboGrafx 16, again, only 50. There's way over 100 of these. If you're wondering what's on there, here you go. And then Retropie, this is really cool. You have the Dreamcast time and date fixed. You have the bezel project. You just need to enable and install that, hook it up to a network, and get that installed if you want it on more systems. Add a hard drive, overclock scripts on here. switch to a track mode, switch to emulation station. Um, all that stuff is on here. The only thing I'm not seeing is it does not have the Easy Hacks toolkit pre-installed, but you can definitely add that on your own. I just want to double check that there's no bezel project pre-installed. Let's just run a Super Nintendo game. So it does have custom loading screens. Okay, so the bezel project is pre-installed for Super Nintendo. As you're seeing, I have a custom Aladdin screen. So I imagine it's probably also the same thing for Nintendo and for Sega Genesis, which are so the bezel project is installed on a few of these systems. Yep, there you go. So pretty cool. The bezel project is a nice little touch. So good old buds, back at it again with the Microsoft Word document that does come when you download this, and as you can see, it's to 3600. I think the 64 gigabyte is 3400. So it's a total of 200 additional CD-based games or games. I don't know if they're all CD, but majority are. And you can see right here, if you look at the PlayStation Portable. Things like that. This collection's the same. Favorites are the same. Preloaded screens, I think, are the same. All the custom background music, all that is very similar. And then his instructions here on how to adjust volume, things like that, are all the same as well, in case you're wondering the differences. But I also have this spreadsheet or this Word document in the 64 gigabyte version. So I'll go ahead and link to the 64 gigabyte version YouTube video in case you want to see some of those differences. So here we are in a track mode, and as you see, it's got a nice little vertical menu here, and it runs just fine on the Raspberry Pi 3B Plus. Not too much lag if I hold it down here. It's running pretty good. And you have all the same settings you have in non-track mode. Oh, it is going to be X on your controller to go in. And so you have all the same scripts you had, overclock scripts, emulation station, all that stuff that you had on the emulation station. Something that you do know is if you press B twice and you exit a track mode, it will turn off your Raspberry Pi. If you want to get back and do emulation station, just click on the X, and then there should be something inside of here called emulation station, and that'll just boot it back into emulation station. There should also be a restart and a shutdown script in here, and that's another way to get in and out in case you do get lost. Okay, let's go back. And so as you see, it's a nested system. It has all the consoles on the front page. Same thing like emulation station there. But then when you go in, for example, if you go into Nintendo, I'm going to go ahead and click in. And then you have all your games. And this time you have a wheel instead of a vertical. And as you see, some of the games are missing the logo. But for the most part, they're here. And it's actually very, look, there's not much lag here. It's running really good. And so if you wanted to pick a game, for example, like Totally Rad, you would just go ahead and click X. And then you get the same launch screen and the same experience you would with Emulation Station. So it'd be cool for a bar top. You're still going to have the bezel project on. Cool for a bar top, something like that. Or just run it. It's a nice option to have that's already set up for you. I know setting it up could be a pain sometimes. Hit these. Dang. Fists on the ground. So you can start select out. I'm just going to go back here and go back into a track mode. Or back into emulation station. All right, so there you have it. Buds back at it again. This time there was a version 1. This is not a version 2, but I mean, I would just argue that he's done a lot of other images. This is version 1 of 128 gigabyte. Thus, it's really not that big of a difference. So he does have some experience under his belt. And if you've used his images in the past, you can expect the same type of quality, same type of build, same type of scripts, things like that, as you saw in this video. So with all that said, I got to give this one an A. Again, remember the biggest differences here are a lot more CD-based games. Now with CD-based games, they take up a ton of space. So the Sega CD, the Dreamcast, the PlayStation, the PSP. So with that, those are the biggest differences on this image. If you're not going to play a lot of those portable games, I would just go for the 64 gigabyte, especially because of the price difference of the SD cards. But as SD cards do get cheaper, you might just say, screw it, go with the 128. Another thing to think about is download speed and, getting access to this. That could play a factor as well. Anyways, got to give it an A. Really good job, buds. Like it a lot. As far as for me and how I like to game, it's got 90+% of what I would want. The bezel project, the bezels on the portables, the having access to an attract mode, things like that. I might do a different setup on the attract mode myself, but stuff like that is just all the user and customizability, and you can definitely do that. Install a different attract mode theme, something like that. So with all that said, I love it. It's great. Let me know what you guys think. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll catch you on the next one.